It is my pleasure to introduce our spotlight conversation with Steve Levitan. Steve first spoke here at TheGrill in 2011 on the heels of winning the Emmy for Outstanding TV Comedy for his show Modern Family. That is an honor that he won in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2015. The show, and I think it's all because he spoke at TheGrill, obviously. The show ran for 11 seasons. It ended in 2020, and it left a very indelible mark on our culture. Now he has a new show. It's called Reboot, and it's on Hulu, which is a streaming service some of you may have heard of. It has an insane cast, which includes Rachel Bloom, Paul Reiser, Judy Greer, Keegan-Michael Key, and Johnny Knoxville. It's about a TV showrunner, lots of research there, who is asked to reboot a successful show many years after it's been off the air. And it gets to use the F word, it traffics in nudity, and it also skewers the hypocrisies of both the TV industry and woke politics. So here's a trailer.
Well, we're definitely on the lookout for breakthrough shows. So, what do you got?
I want to reboot the old sitcom Step Right Up.
Step right up.
Step right. Are you serious?
And I want to do it with the original cast.
According to Wikipedia, Clay Barber, drug charge and disorderly conduct. Marie Jensen did a low-budget sci-fi cable show.
Captain, I'll repair them as soon as I nourish my larva.
And Reed Sterling left to pursue a film career.
I'm the ruthless mother standing here with a 38 snub nose. You know what? I was thinking, what if I infused it with a layer of weariness and vulnerability?
Maybe don't think.
It's just not what they taught us at the Yale School of Drama.
Okay, we're done.
Remember I told you they were rebooting my old show?
Is she gonna be there?
You mean Bree?
I'm stuck and I can't breathe. Unhook this.
Fine, but I'm in a committed relationship.
What are you, 15?
I got it.
Hi.
I thought it would be weird if the first time we saw each other was on set.
That would be weird.
Everyone, this is Gordon. He is the creator of the original show. Gordon, new writers.
This one of those diversity intern training things?
Literal gasp.
Comedy's evolved since you last wrote for television. I mean, honestly, whole species have evolved.
That's what I'm talking about. Come on, guys, let's bring it in.
No reason to do that.
Your mom still comes to set with you every day.
She's been coming to set with me my whole life.
Dude, that's creepy.
Could you say something to my mom?
Yeah, what the
You know how in the old sitcom, the characters always did the right thing? Man! They don't do the right thing anymore.
Oh, boy.
What if Zach finds out?
Finds what out?
That I couldn't talk to your mom yet.
Too hard, huh?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Not that.
We gotta meet Marie Jensen. Can we just tape this later? Because honestly, I'm feeling really gross right now, and according to wardrobe, I look like a cow.
We're live to 85,000 people.
Hi, everyone! Yeah. Hello.
You actually have the rare gift of being funny. You can make millions of people laugh. To bring people a little joy, yes, that is as good and honorable thing as a man can do.
Gordon, I'm speechless.
Shit, if I knew that's all it took, I would have complimented you years ago.
I work at Hulu. This is my first time on a set. I'm new to humor.
What do you do?
Vice President of Comedy.
Fun.
All right, please welcome Stephen Levitan.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
You. Where do you want me?
On the red couch. There it is.
Here I am.
All right, thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, it plays. The trailer plays.
Well, there's some nice moments there. I keep seeing the things that I wish were in the trailer now as it goes on, but it's good. It's good. I'm happy with it.
It's so good. Again, any longer, it's a long trailer,
Yeah.
but I do recommend watching the show. I binged it, but actually after the first one, I was like, okay, Stephen Levitan refound his stride. Like, not that you lost it, but honestly, after finishing a show like Modern Family, it's got to be intimidating to try to create something again. Like, how was that?
No pressure, right?
Well, like, what's that period like?
Modern Family? Yeah, I think it was tricky. Modern Family ended And 2 weeks after we wrapped production, or 2 or 3 weeks max, COVID hit, and the world shut down. So that was sort of the end of Modern Family in the way. So it wasn't a natural, normal period of a big show like that ending after 11 years, because everything stopped. So it's, in a weird way, took the edge off of Modern Family.
You're right, like the whole world is in crisis, so you don't have to worry about, nobody's looking at you.
Wasn't my biggest worry then, was how am I going to top Modern Family when the world was shut down. But it gave me time to think and to try to figure out what I really wanted to do and what I don't want to do anymore. And that's how I kind of ended up here.
What did you decide that you didn't want to do anymore?
Well, I think anything, I try to do any version of another Modern Family, like trying to, first of all, I think it's virtually impossible, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to have a show that hits on a broad scale the way that Modern Family did, or anything of that era, because of fragmentation. The world is just, the viewing habits have changed. So, you have to change expectations now. And so I didn't want to go chasing after something that felt like I was doing another version of that. Like I wanted to stretch creatively. It had been a long time. Modern Family was 11 years, 250 episodes.
Yeah.
We sometimes did 3-4 stories in an episode. So that's a lot of stories. And, I feel like we had wrung every ounce of comedy out of that thing that we could. And so I was ready to just try something very different. Modern Family dealt with my home life and all of our writers' home lives. We got to really dig into the nuances of what was going on in our families. And then this was a chance for me to explore what I was doing during the day. And it didn't start out that way. It just started out as an idea. I thought, oh, that's a good setting, for a show. But
the studio, the network lot.
The idea of a reboot, the idea of like a bunch of people coming back to a show, and how interesting that is to, it would be like going back to high school a little bit if you think about it. It's like, all these old dynamics. It's like a little bit like going to a high school reunion or something where everybody left with all sorts of expectations and behaviors and all that, and then you're coming back years later and maybe things played out the way you expected, maybe they didn't, and suddenly you find yourself acting the same way that you did when you were in high school, when you were around those people, and then you add to that, the pressures of, being on trying to create a hit television show today in this, environment.
I mean, to me, if I may say, that show for me could be on broadcast television. I mean, minus the nudity and stuff. If there was a daring enough, like if Fox still existed, I guess it does still exist, but the one that before, you know what I mean? Like they would do stuff that was edgy and.
Yeah, I mean, if we took out the swearing and there was one tiny bit of nudity in the pilot, but if you took that out, yes, it could be, but I don't think it would. I don't know that it would play because you're just aiming differently on a streamer. You're telling stories that are more serialized. And the most important thing for me, the biggest change of all, is running time. Modern Family episode was 21 minutes and 30 seconds for a half hour, for a 30-minute comedy.
Right.
21 minutes, 30 seconds. And we couldn't go longer than that. And so if you had a story that had some nice moments, but they weren't absolutely necessary to that story, I mean, if you had some, a particular, I love that joke, I love that moment, I love that look he gave her, but, you're 6 minutes long, you just have to start cutting like crazy. And so you don't get to just let things breathe the same way that's been the biggest thing for me. Like, I could live without
The nudity, the this, that.
yeah, and saying
Yeah.
fuck every, that it's nice that people get to
Swear?
speak the way that
Oh.
they speak in real life. I do appreciate that a lot, but I can do without that. It was just the luxury of time for me. That was the biggest
cool.
thing.
Well, the fun thing for, obviously, like, I take a special pleasure in watching it, and probably everybody in this room would too, because I work inside the industry enough that, not like you do, but as a journalist, and so you're certainly watching the show within the show and thinking about what are the parts from your experiences as a showrunner that you've layered in there, and then you have all of these inside jokes, like the one we saw in the trailer where the Hulu executive is a former, I don't know if she's an engineer or whatever, but she's a great character, and suddenly VP of comedy.
Yeah, I found myself. I didn't again. Like it started off as this, like I said, this thing that that's an interesting arena for a show, and then as we were doing it more and more, and things became, as we dug into it, more personal, and I found out I had a lot to say about this.
About the industry.
About the industry.
Yeah, I mean, you say some mean things about Hulu in the show.
Mean things?
Well, yeah, you're like, yeah, you make fun of it.
Well, I have a I have a great relationship with everybody at Hulu.
Supposedly.
They really like the show.
Supposedly.
No, they do. I do. Don't. And they really like the show, and they're very supportive of it. And in the beginning, I said, hey, they knew what the pitch was, and they bought the show. And then I said I'd like to set this at Hulu. You guys cool with it? And they were 100% cool with it. Uh-huh. And in fact, the only time they gave me a note on that where you might expect, hey, we really have to look like, it was when the executive was describing the demographics and the terminology that she used. They said, that's not how we would say it. And I'm thinking like, they're worried that they sound too ridiculous. They say we would say it like this, and it was twice as ridiculous.
Oh, really?
And they knew it, and they, everybody was like really cool about it. And I think I always say they really enjoy the scenes with the network executives because they feel like they're the real heroes of the show. And so it's
That's
fun.
funny. That's funny in and of itself. Well, you certainly have enough material to draw on. The other thing that is so fun to enjoy on the show is your comments, your commentary on woke politics and the what's the word? Culture clash between the sort of generational clash between the Paul Reiser character and his writing buddies in the writing room, and the Rachel Bloom character and all the people she brings in, who of course are either like trans or of color or gay or she's gay, right? And every other person's like an old Jewish white person who's friends with Paul Reiser. And I found it brilliant. We have a clip we'd like to show of the writers' room.
Is this the?
It's bad.
About the sex stuff?
It's the sex stuff.
Is the setup in there of it? Do we know what the?
Maybe set it up.
I'm not sure exactly where it starts, but
it starts with scissoring.
Yeah, it's there. In the episode, we've just learned that two of the female cast members
are doing the nasty.
They ended up having a fling the night before, and it's a whole thing. And the writers and one of the writers overhears a couple of the actors talking about it, and then it comes back to the writers' room.
Wait, I'm confused. What is scissoring?
It's when two women spread their legs a la scissors, and I don't want to be crass, but they rub their pussies together.
Okay, this is from the woman who was just showing us pictures of her grandson.
You can't put me in a box.
Not for another year or so.
Where were these jokes yesterday instead of the 50 pitches on oat milk?
For the record, scissoring is bullshit. It is a fantasy of lesbian sex that exists primarily in porn made for hetero men.
Why do you have to ruin everything?
Why am I having such a hard time picturing this scissors thing?
The whole thing is quite simple, actually, okay? You have two women, in this case are Bree and Timberly, and they lie up on a bed or perhaps a beach towel with their legs spread akimbo, and then they gingerly press each other's loins together.
Why does Alan get to say things like that, but I get yelled at for ordering 2 soups?
Yeah, let's get back to work.
Yeah, but right after Alan tells the story about the time he got the blowjob from Paul Lynde in his Hollywood Square.
Shut up.
It was the 70s. I had taken a Quaalude.
Oh my God, Paul Lynde is a daddy. What was he like?
The man had a jaw like a python.
Okay, let's just stop prying into each other's sex lives.
That's half the reason I come to work. How about you, 2 Soups? Who you bringing the clam chowder home to?
2 soups? Is that my nickname now?
Hannah looks uncomfortable. Let's talk about her.
No, we're not gonna do that.
You know what? Hannah's right. Let's get serious. We got at least 3 pages to cut out of this script. And what do we use to cut things?
Scissors.
Came up again, naturally.
Yep.
I'll tell you a story. Goldie Hawn. This is before she was famous.
Not the Goldie Hawn.
Mom.
Okay.
So, one of the really interesting things about this show for me is when this whole idea came up, and then, you know, the notion of the one actor is saying, oh, yeah, these 2 were, you know, because they were scissoring last night. And then one of our young writers, young female writers, who was in her 20s or like maybe 30, said just that thing. That's bullshit. It doesn't really happen in real life. It is made up.
It's a male hetero fantasy.
Yeah, it's a, you know, for heterosexual porn. It was an invention for that. And this debate broke out, and I went, well, that goes in the show, like right there, like what we're talking about right here is exactly the show. It's so that happened time and time and time again, and it reminded me of my days on Larry Sanders. It's the same thing where I would be in conversations, you know, with Gary Shandling, and we're talking about Larry, and then all of a sudden you didn't know, wait a minute, did it just switch to real life? Am I talking about the show? Like, it happened all the time. Real things became fake things. I mean, we would steal from in the moment and all that. And that's what we're trying to do here, what they did for the talk shows, you know, the talk shows at the time, that this is, you know, I'm not comparing myself or anything like that, but this is my attempt to bring that kind of authenticity to this world. So I do feel like it's something I told the actors and the writers and their set designers and everybody right from the beginning was, this is what we do for a living. Like, this is it. So if we can't get this right and we can't be accurate, then we're just being lazy. So as a very silly example, I walked down one day and there was a scene at the craft service table, at the fake craft service table. And it's always interesting when I'd walk down from the real writer's room to watch a run-through of a scene in the fake writer's room and all that, but all sorts of weird things. But then I noticed that they had moved the craft service table to in front of the stage.
Oh, the stage.
The fake craft service table. And I said, why is it over here now? They go, well, it looks better, you know, when we're shooting it looks better to have the thing behind. I'm like, it's never here. It would never be here. It looks ridiculous here. Move it back to the corner, the shitty corner where it is. And that's where it belongs. So we do that all the time. Like, that became the thing. Like, everything has to be the way it's done. And if not, then let's not do it, or let's find a different thing to show if we can't get it, you know, right. So I think people in the business, I don't think, you know, whether someone likes the show or not, they're not going to say, it doesn't work like that. It works
does.
like that.
Is your writer's room diverse like that? And also like...
Well, it wasn't, well, yeah, it was a little bit of, it wasn't that cut and dry.
Split down the middle.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm like, oh God, I'm the old guy. But there were younger people, and there were people of color and all that would, you know, and we'd have those discussions, and you know, we would get into all those, you know, the nuances of that thing. I mean, the idea of the multi-generational writers room came up during pre-production, and you know, immediately knew, like, oh boy, that's good, because I didn't know how. I knew how we were going to make the show, on stage and the actors and all that kind of stuff, keep that lively and fun. But I didn't know exactly yet what the writer's room was going to be. But as soon as that idea came into our world, it was immediately, this is a really big part of the show because it's just so prevalent in our lives.
Well, exactly, and that I think is really, it's really fun to watch the actors who we know and love for so many years, but to get where the show really cuts to the heart of commentary for me is in the writer's room, where you're talking about, in a funny way just like that, all of the politics that now hang over comedy and that makes comedy really hazardous. And so I wonder about that from your perspective. Like, I think all the time, it must be scary in some ways to try and do comedy if you're a white heterosexual male of a certain age, because either you don't get it, or if you say something that you think is funny, other people might find it offensive. And so I wonder if you, like, how you think about that. It's obvious you're aware that there's so many pitfalls out there because tastes and mores have changed.
Yeah, I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
To be really honest with you, because I know that I'm coming from a good place when I'm doing it.
Doesn't everybody?
Not necessarily. I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm not saying. I think most of the time people are, but I think sometimes
not that they are. That they think they are.
Well, they might think they are, but there's a little bit of, it's like, you think back on some of the, the old-timey comedians, like making a joke about, the black people, but I kid the blacks.
Right.
That doesn't make it okay, to do that. But, there's a way to, I think if you're approaching it from a good heart, and you're trying to point out the hypocrisy sometimes, or the double standards. We did a joke in the Modern Family pilot that I thought was a really important joke to set the tone for that show. And Mitch and Cam were talking about it in one of their little interviews that they did. The gay couple, they were talking about that they had just adopted this kid, and they were going to have they were going to ask one of their lesbian friends to, help with surrogacy or something, or to help him have a baby. But the joke was something along the lines of, with lesbians and how angry they can get, or something like who needs that? Whatever it was some them showing these. Here are two gay characters who also have their own prejudices, which was a real thing that the male gay community
has certain tropes
about the female,
the lesbian community.
The lesbian gay community, and so it's okay to point out those things that we all have in each, that we, as long as you're.
I'm not so sure it's okay anymore unless you're from that community.
But the joke was on. I do think that I stand by that joke because we're pointing out that even the people who are often, saying we need, don't joke about us, and we need to be respectful. They'll turn around and do their own versions of that. I think that, and we had a lot of different things like that in Modern Family. So I think that as long as you're coming from a good place and you're trying to make a point, that someone doesn't understand. If you're trying to show that someone is being clueless in a moment like that, you can either say, we on TV are going to pretend that doesn't happen, that people don't misstep, or
I think
older
that's
people.
totally where TV is going. I think that's where the culture's gone because people don't want to get canceled.
Right, but in my job on this particular show, I can pretend that doesn't happen, or I can point out that it does happen, and then it leads to discussions. I've been in those discussions. I've been in discussions where the room has been, a room full of smart, I think forward-thinking people have been sharply divided on whether or not something is okay to do. So I'm in the unique position with this show to be able to show those conversations. And that allows us to illuminate that in a way that you can't when it's a show about something completely different.
Right.
And you're just making that joke. Here we're saying, can we do this joke? Or you can't do that joke.
Right.
It says this.
Well, that's true.
It's a unique
true.
position.
That is true. I personally think comedy is really treacherous these days.
Yeah, I get it. I think you can slightly innocently overstep and go, whoops, that was a little too far, because I do think that comedy is about testing boundaries. I think it's hard to really misstep and genuinely hurt people without being a bit clueless.
Talk a little bit about what are the conversations that you've had about where the show's coming from and those kinds of things with the cast and with who are some of them, by the way, are writers. Like Rachel's a writer, and
like one of my
Keegan's a writer, right?
Yeah, there are so many of them have written. One of my favorite, like we have this speech where Paul Reiser, who plays one of the showrunners, version,
right.
He'll talk about actors, and basically a lot of speeches are like about how actors are children or they're bottomless pits of need.
Oh, that was fantastic. I wrote that down.
And
yes.
it's fun for me to hear an actor deliver that line to another.
How many years have you been waiting to get
but
somebody to say that?
But it's fun, and it's fun for him to get to do it too, because I think if he weren't also a writer who's been in a position like that, it might look like I'm, we're making him say things he doesn't believe. But he's in on the joke, and it's just fun to talk about a lot of the little craziness, bits of craziness in this business.
That's very funny. Yeah, I like that thing you have in the writers' room about somebody gets dinged every time they mention Harvard. That little. Thing.
The
and
person,
anytime Michael Key's character is like constantly name dropping
he's
Yale.
bringing up Yale all the time,
right.
and his girlfriend says, because we've seen him now bring up Yale School of Drama a couple of times, she says, you have such a large penis, why do you always have to bring up Yale? And we have fun with that. There's a scene when Paul Reiser was complaining about actors, how they're never happy. They're complaining because they didn't, the free watches they got aren't, as good as this, or they're not, the free Rolexes they got are not as nice as the Porsches that the cast of Will and Grace got. And by the way, true.
True, right?
True. And then she says,
the Porsches are true. I don't know if the Rolexes are true.
But the Porsches are true. And she said, and Rachel's character says, with the cast of Will and Grace got Porsches, and he goes, just the shitty ones, the Boxsters. And I remember those, like I was on that lot when all of a sudden there were like 4 Boxsters lined up. And I was like, holy shit. And bro, a couple people were like, it's not the 911. It's just like those weird little observations over the years. I realized I had like more of them in stories.
I think it's great that you're using that, because one of the hazards, I think, of having observed people who come to Hollywood with really fresh experiences and often write about things that are completely disconnected from Hollywood because they bring whatever you bring, your Midwestern upbringing or whatever
right.
to the show. And then you're here for 20 years and you're living a very privileged and protected life. And it's really hard to find I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about in general. I'm actually not going to name people who I can think of, but who have a really hard time finding the creative edge, I think, because their experiences have just been, they're like in a protective bubble. And one of the smartest things you did here is you actually squared the circle because you wrote about the thing that you're actually most knowledgeable about, because you're not writing about growing up on the mean streets of Chicago or whatever it is.
The mean streets of Glenview, Illinois. I remember when Chris Lloyd and I were in the beginning stages of talking about. Well, let me take it back one step. The show that he and I had done right before that was called Back to You, and it was a multi-camera sitcom.
Right.
With Patricia Heaton. This is kind of crazy if you look back on how funny life is. Kelsey Grammer, Patricia Heaton, Fred Willard, Ty Burrell, Josh Gad, directed by Jimmy Burrows, Chris Lloyd and I running it. Like you kind of go, you probably would go.
How could you fail?
You probably go, I probably would bet on that, right?
Yeah.
But wrong network, writer strike, whatever reasons, it didn't last, and that's okay.
Mercury in retrograde.
Yeah, but it's okay because it led to this. But I remember when I was in that last season, I'd be on the stage and it's a show night, and it was that set up punchline, the rhythms of a multicam. That it started to gnaw at me. It started to make me a little mad. It was like a jingle, that it gets in your head and you can't get it out. It was like da 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 ha, and the audience laughs da 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 ha, da da da, and I started to go, I just can't do this anymore. So when the show got canceled, I felt bad for the human beings involved in that and all that. But from my own selfish point of view, I was really ready to do something different and something that felt much more real to me. I just want to write real and not worry about those rhythms and all that stuff. So then talking about Modern Family, and then we had a decision to make. Where are we going to set it? And what kind of families are these going to be? And there were a lot of shows like, Roseanne and things like that where, you can't, people hate rich people and people, and there was some talk of like, let's not have it, people hate people from California. That was Chris always thought people hate LA people. But my attitude was, I just want to do a show that we can just do here. I don't want to have to, when we're out shooting in the world, I don't want to be hiding palm trees. I don't want to be changing license plates on every car that drives by. I want to just do a show that's about our lives, set it here. Our families are not that different from, I have friends, all my friends in the Midwest and whatever, where I'm from, our lives are not, our family lives with our kids are not drastically different or in many ways different at all. Their schools are in fact much nicer than ours. And so we embraced it. I literally said, when we were trying to look for a house for Jay and Gloria on Modern Family, I said, he's a divorced guy. He's got to end up in some cheesy modern house. They brought me some examples of them. I said, no, there's one on my street. I showed them a picture. I go, find something like that. Well, that was the house we ended up using.
No way.
For 11 years. Like we were shooting on my street. And the spot where I taught my kids to ride a bike was where Jay taught Gloria where to ride a bike or how to ride a bike on Modern Family. So my point was, the more specific we made it to ourselves and to our real actual experience, the more people related to it and they understood it and they got it and they didn't mind. That's their lives. And they're not, it was fun to watch, Jay had some dough. It's fun to watch that. Mitch and Cam lived like a very middle, like everybody was, and nobody minded those things that we were worried about. And I think the same thing here. I'm going to make it as real as possible, and then hopefully the audience will just appreciate the authenticity of that.
Yeah. All right, two things I wanted, before I have to let you go, I have to ask about. One, I want to talk about the business side of streaming, but before that, I have to ask you, this cast is so wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you write it with them in mind?
The only person that when I started, 2 years before I started writing, I think maybe just before COVID shut us all down, Michael Key is a friend, and so I said, come have a drink, and I want to pitch you this idea, and so because I just thought he would be a really good center of that world, and then after that it was just prototypes. That's how I do it. I start putting prototypes down on paper, like
She's a Judy Greer type. Let's get Judy Greer.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is that, and like that has happened to and that happened a bunch of times here, and other times you're finding it as you go. Johnny Knoxville is an out of the box casting choice for that character. There were a lot of more obvious choices, but as soon as his name came up, I'm like, I just like how fresh it sounded, and there's something so charismatic about him and so non-sitcom-y about him that I felt like it was a risk worth taking that we hadn't seen him do that before.
But he's also playing a version of the guy we think of as Johnny Knoxville, because he's somebody who's like recovering from addiction or bad behavior, getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also like some of that melds over time, that as I get to know the actors and, you start to like look for little bits of their lives and what wears well on them, and you start writing to that. But yes, he and Clay are starting to meld, a little bit. And, yeah, so it's fun, but the cast is an embarrassment of riches.
Of riches, for sure. And you are writing season 2, I should say, which is why we have to really appreciate that Steve took time out, because he's writing all the time. So thank you for doing that. I did want to say, at one point you had critical words for the streaming business and how that was changing television and changing the television business and a whole kind of economic ecosystem. You've changed your mind about that, apparently, and. But you still have concerns about what streaming is doing. And we just came off of a very lively producing roundtable where we talked about the challenges producers face. One of the things they face is sort of the way streaming pays. You don't really have back-end incentives anymore. That makes it difficult. Producing is hard all the time.
Yeah.
But and then writers also face this kind of no residuals.
I mean, world. I won't, but I could talk an hour about so many aspects of this. When Hulu first became prevalent a long time ago, I was critical. And I was sort of publicly critical about it because what was bothering me was that we were doing shows that were for network, and then these shows would go on Hulu as like a bonus. It would just go to Hulu because these companies owned those services, or a third of those services are like, Fox owned a third of Hulu at the time, so that they would provide content. But then we would air, and the next morning you would get judged immediately by the overnights. So you would fail or succeed based on the overnights. And it would be like the headline of like, whatever show disappoints or whatever. And I wasn't even speaking specifically about something I was doing. I don't even remember what I was doing at that point. But nobody was taking into account, well, wait a minute. What about all these people who are you're siphoning viewers to another service that you're building, a business that you're building, and we're getting criticized because our audience is shrinking. Over here, and that just doesn't seem fair. That's the, let's just at the very least count it differently. Let's either stop reporting on the overnights and stop.
Well, which we did.
Eventually did,
right.
But I mean, decisions were being made about whether or not shows were getting canceled based on overnights, and it was not fair because they were not taking into account that. On top of which, they were building a giant business off of our products, and we weren't getting compensated for that in any additional way. And so obviously the world has changed drastically since then, and the business models have been trying to keep up with those changes. I understand that viewers are the viewership is fragmented. You're not, seeing as many shows that are getting, tens of millions of viewers or any shows besides major events that are doing that. And that all has to be taken into account, obviously. But we're in a weird moment of pain, perhaps, where it's changing, and everybody's trying to keep up with those changes in a way that's fair for everybody, and we're not there yet. We're trying. Everybody's trying to some degree, but we're not there yet. So I worry about mostly. What I worry about mostly, like I think about, is the sort of the journeyman writers, and by that I mean the people who are not the showrunners, the top showrunners. Those people who are great writers. I mean, you can have somebody who has won multiple Emmys or just been on incredible shows and written amazing scripts year after year after year, and they've been doing this for a long time. And because of the changes, and there's no more reruns because there's half as many episodes, they're now having to find 2 jobs and
Right, it's not 22 episodes; it's 8 episodes.
And they're in the residuals. They're not getting residual and everything. And I'm watching those people who are at the top of their game, not getting compensated the way that other parts of this business or other members of or whatever contributors of this business are. So I see, again, listen, I'm for everybody getting their fair piece of this pie, and I hope that, I like to think that that's what everybody wants, but that's probably naive. But I think that writers are falling behind right now, and even I can see in sort of like you can make the same case that actors, the day players, the people who come in are working weeks to I got a part on this show, I got a part on that show. They're kind of suffering the same thing with residuals and all that. But just to watch, you go from being a writer who is used to making, 22 episodes a year and getting paid to do that and getting reruns, and they built up their life to do that, and suddenly the rules have changed overnight, and it's painful. And you can say, well, tough, that's the world or whatever. But I'm watching that happen to friends of mine, and I care about those people, and I'd like to see that addressed. Before we're pulling all these gigantic profits off the top, let's make sure that we're taking care of the people who are making that show special.
That's good. I'm glad. I'm glad you got to share that. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's a really fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
The show is great. I'm so glad to know there's going to be a season 2, more than likely.
I'm very, very proud of it. I hope people get a chance to watch it.
Yeah, they will. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much.